Good morning everybody, and once again welcome back to the channel. In this particular video I would love to show you how you can leverage a volume based approach while reading data and fetching data from your object store incrementally. So let's take a look at the problem, and then of course I'll explain you the solution. Of course, the typical file processing, again, there are various ways to process file incrementally. In my, I guess a month back or probably a few months back, I made a video where I specifically said not to use the last modified file timestamp because that method, there are scenarios where you can probably miss files. So the naive way now to process file is, okay, you create a pending manifest file. This has all your files like file1, file1, file2. Basically, all your S3 URIs are there inside that file. You read the data, you process, and then you archive it into the archive folder. So the next time, fresh sets of file can be processed. Now, in case if you're using max file, so what I mean by that is, say you said for every so if you have a bad job, right, and you said, hey, you know what, every single run I want to process 50 files at a given time, but this approach has a small catch here, right? So if you do that, here is what's going to happen. Let me explain you with a very nice example, right? So consider you have these data, tenant A, tenant B, tenant C, and so on. Let me just make this tenant C, okay? So you have this data coming in, and each tenant, of course, some tenants are small, some tenants are huge. So larger tenants usually will send you, more number of files, right? Some tenants might basically send you less number of files, right? And also the file size would vary a lot, right? But in this case, if you said, hey, you know what, in my bad job, I'm going to process n files at every given run. And let's say the n is 10. So the first time you'll process 10 jobs over here for this one. Second one would be 10 for tenant B. And third one would be here. Now, naturally, when the next run happens, of course, another files would be read, right? And so on. But what you would see, but the problem here is you can see for this one, right? We of course process 10 files. But now the backlog is increasing, right? So the total number of files are being added constantly, right? So the backlog is gonna keep increasing. So there will be some leaders, there will be some laggers, right? So now how do I solve this problem, right? So what you can do instead is instead of using total number of files, use a volume-based approach. Now here is how it works. You say, hey, you know what? I want to process 10 megabytes, or let's say I want to process 1 GB of data. So in the first run, 1 GB, again, 20 file constituted 1 GB. So all the 20 file will be processed. 60 files constitute 1 GB. So all the 60 file will be processed. So here you're not using the total number of files because that's unpredictable at this point. What you're using instead is volume. You're saying, hey, I want to process n GB, right? So that's how it works, right? So let me show you a small demo. I think I pulled up a nice demo for you. Feel free to try it out, of course. So first I'm going to generate some data. Okay, so let me do that. Let me go to my object store. I don't have anything right now. So I have a small demo pulled up for you. So Python 3, let's generate some data files. So again, this is going to mimic that. As you can see, some tenants will have more number of files. So again, more files, some tenants has less files. So the number of files is not constant, right? They're constantly being added, right? As you can see, right? So cool, we have that. Now if I probably refresh data, and you can see maybe tenant B will have 2 files, 20 kilobytes. But if I go to tenant A, actually here, you can see more number of files, but they are smaller in size, 3.5 kilobytes, right? So again, same scenario that I told, right? If you have this, right, you don't have control over the total number of files, right? So instead of using total number of files, use a volume-based approach, right? So for example, in my first script, as you can see, here I have a V1 here. Let me show you. Give me one sec. I just want to pull up that code to show you. So I'll go to process tenants. Here I'm processing 5 files at a time, right? For each tenant in a loop, right? In a threaded fashion, right? So if I do the first version, I would miss certain files, right? So for example, if I did this, right? And again, I really want to show you. That's why I pulled up a small demo for you, right? So again, this will take a couple of seconds to process the data. Again, it's going to read the data for each tenant, read the Spark data frame, and then create iceberg table at the target. And then again, it's going to do that in a threaded fashion, right? So if I go to my object store at this point, if I refresh, here you can see pending, right? So you can see tenant B and tenant E are being processed right now. They are being done in parallel right now, right? As you can see, tenant B and tenant E. Let's refresh. Now tenant B and tenant E are still being processed, right? So again, there's a pending manifest which contains a list of S3 file. I can actually show you. I think it'll be pretty fast. Hopefully I can show you. Here you can see, right? Two files are there, right? So let's wait. Let me complete this and then I'll show you the next approach, right? So let's go to the Spark job. Almost there. Tenancy is being completed. So if I refresh my object store, again tenant A is now been completed, right? So C was completed, so A is being completed, right? And once the data is processed, it's archived to the archive folder. So next time a fresh set of data can be processed again, right? Okay, cool, done, right? So let's refresh, right? So here you can see, right? Tenant A, we still have files, but again in a streaming, more files are constantly being added, right? So you see the problem here, what I'm trying to show you, right? Now let's do this, right? So Python 3, let me generate some data files. Okay, same data files. I want to generate more data files. Now instead of using total number of files, let's use a volume based approach, right? So the version 2 of the code I have that I want to show you. Let's go process tenant here. So now instead of I'm saying, hey, I want to process 10 files or 20 files, I'm gonna say, hey, I want to process, let's say 500 megabytes for a given tenant on a given run, right? So now I'm not being dependent on the total number of files. So if tenant 1 is sending more number of files but smaller files, and if it's under 500 megabytes, I'll process all the files. Tenant B, let's say, is sending only 10 files worth of 300 megabytes, I'll process all the 3. So I'm not using total number of files here, right? So that's what I wanted to show you, right? So now let me fire this job, okay? And you will see we won't have now laggers, right? So Spark, I'll submit the V2 of the code. Again, the only small change what we do while creating a pending manifest file, if I open up this one, here, observe this one, right? So if you use the file count, right? What I'm saying, use the file size instead of total number of files for processing. That's much better, right? As you can see. So let's see. So now the job is running. Now if I open up my object store, if I open up pending, here you will see the size is varying. Again, they are pretty small, but you're not gonna see a big difference there, right? But the total number of files for tenant B or tenant E might differ, because now we are saying, hey, instead of like n files, process like n megabytes, right? So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So all the files will be processed, right? So yeah, I just wanted to show you this approach. Let this complete. Hopefully, this will be done very soon, probably. Again, it's a very simple thing, but again, if you use total number of files, again, if you're using AWS Glue or any batch processing system, try not to use total number of files as a baseline versus try to use the volume based approach. For example, I want to process n gigabytes or n megabytes, right? That's much better than using total number of files. So everything is complete now. If I go to my S3 and refresh, look, I don't have any data files. Everything is archived, right? So I was not dependent on total number of files, because certain tenants can send more number of files, certain can send less number of files. The file size can vary. I do not have control on that. What I can do to make it more predictable is I can use a volume based approach instead. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll leave the snippets of both the codes in probably my Medium blog. So in case if you want to try it out. That's all I have for the video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.